Hi, it's John Brown again. In my last video, in my introduction to board games, I talked about how a lot of games on the market now for kids, or games you can play with your kids, really aren't that great. So you might be thinking, well, what games are that great? And here I'm doing kind of a two-idea video. These are games that are considered gateway games among board gamers, games that are simpler as some other games, give you an opportunity to get into some of the more difficult games. And also, by default, they're games you can play with your kids. Not necessarily extremely young kids, there's a different subset of games for that. But let's just say I have an 8-year-old. I'm not saying he's exceptionally smart, but these are games that even he would consider pretty easy now by comparison to some games we've played. These are games we might want to start with, but they're games that you can play with your kid, they might enjoy, and you might actually enjoy too, which is really a great thing when it comes to playing with kids. And even if you don't have kids or aren't interested in gaming with kids, if you're just looking for some board game to start out with to try to say, I do kind of enjoy this genre and maybe I'd be interested in something a little more complicated, here's some ideas that I think are interesting. The first game we're going to talk about is a game called Carcassonne, and Carcassonne couldn't be much simpler or much more fun. You simply, on your turn, grab a tile, flip it over and see what it does, and then you choose where you want to place that tile on the board. So I might take this tile, and I might say, if I'm the blue player, maybe I want to keep building this road. That will give me more points when that road is finally completed. And then on your turn, you can choose to place a person, or, well, a meeple as they are called. In this example, I could place one in the beginnings of this city and claim it for myself, and when the city's completed, I get the points and take it back. Now, I can't place on the road because there's already somebody there, or I could place him to be a farmer, where he lays down in the field, and basically at the end of the game, he scores points for every town that he can get to. Right here we see there's one completed town. It's all the way around. So this town's only going to be worth 2 points when we get our worker off, but as soon as the town is completed, if we had a worker there, we get him back. So we have a limited number of workers, but basically we're using them to score points. We get bonus points for these shields. They can be in a town, they can be in a cloister. A cloister is always a fun word to say. And once all the spaces around a cloister are completed, we get our guy back and we score 9 points for it. And the great thing about this game is you can just claim towns and claim roads and cloisters and ignore farming if you're playing with younger or brand new gamers, because the farming can be a little bit confusing. But all there is to the game is take a tile. This one's pretty much a road. If I was a red player, I wouldn't want to put it here and make their road longer to score more points. So maybe I'll put it down here, and I will grab one of my red meeples, and I will say, I will claim this road for me, and then whenever that road is completed, I'll score points for it. Or I could lay him down to be a farmer as well. But basically, you just grab a tile, put it out, and put a guy down there. It's really simple, but surprisingly engaging. And well, if you enjoy the game and want to get into things that are more complicated, there are literally a bajillion expansions for this and all different kinds of things you can do that make the game a little bit more interesting or complicated, or, however, whatever theme you want to go with, there's probably a Carcassonne expansion for it. So you can play with lots of different players, lots of different colors, keep track on this meeple-shaped scoreboard, which I don't know if is cool or creepy, and again, a very simple game, but surprisingly enjoyable. How about a simple game with lots of chucking dice? Here we have King of Tokyo that I mentioned briefly in my introduction to board gaming video. King of Tokyo is pretty simple. We want to be the giant monster that's ruling in Tokyo. And each round we're going to take these dice, and if you're familiar with Yahtzee, then you'll be familiar with this mechanic. You roll the dice and see what you get, and then you can decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to re-roll. And you can do this a total of 2 more times, so 3 dice rolls. And these dice do different things. These dice heal you if you've taken damage. If you get a set of 1s, 2s, or 3s, if you get 3 of a kind, you get that many points. These do attacks. So let's say we are playing as the king and we are currently in Tokyo. And the attacks we do damage to everyone else. And we keep track of our health and the number of points we've earned on these boards. So we potentially can heal or do damage to other people. We score points by taking over the city of Tokyo, or by being there when our next round starts. But here's the thing, if we stay in Tokyo, we can't heal. And if we do damage to other people, we do damage to all the other monsters outside of Tokyo. But they all do damage to us when they hit us on their turn. So these heals would be useless to us if we were in Tokyo. And we've only got 1, 2, so maybe we want to re-roll that. If we go again, we get some more heals, a 1 and a 3. These again are pretty useless. And then we roll again. Ooh, we've managed to do 4 damage to all the other monsters, which could potentially knock another monster out. If Cyber Bunny, who Cyber Bunny rules by the way, only had 4 health, then he or she would be out of the game. And the games go pretty quick, and you either want to score a certain number of victory points or eliminate everybody else. And one thing we didn't have come up on these dice are these energy tokens, which give you these, what I call energon cubes. But anyways, that let you buy these cards that let you upgrade your monster, get special abilities. So even though the monsters don't come with any different abilities, they just look different. And here's some more over here. Lots of different monsters to choose from. The Kraken. But anyways, so as the game goes on, we can choose these things to power us up and do different things. But it's really just simple. You're just chucking dice. And if you take damage while you're in Tokyo, anyone who, if you get hit, you can say, oh, I want to leave if I'm still alive, and the person who hits you has to come in. So there's a risk-reward mechanic of how long do I want to stay in Tokyo. If I'm there at the start of my next turn, I'm going to get more points, but am I going to survive that long? And if I do stay, do I want to stay again and potentially die or hope to get more points? So it's a really light game, just rolling dice, maybe doing a little upgrading, but it's just really a hoot. Another game I mentioned briefly was Forbidden Island, and in Forbidden Island you're going to have a little bit bigger island than this. You're going to use all of these beautifully illustrated tiles, and you're going to have different people out on the board. And you have your little pawn representing who you are, and all of these people are going to have different abilities. Maybe they're good at shoring up tiles, or maybe they can get to certain spaces, whatever the case may be. And on your turn you have a certain number of actions, and for an action you can move around the board. For an action you can shore up tiles, so these tiles are partly underwater, but maybe I can flip them back over so that they're safe for now. Because if they're flipped over once, and then flipped over a second time, or when their card comes up a second time that is, they're removed from the game. And each round we'll move around, do actions, and we need to cooperate with each other and figure out what the best thing to do is, because on each of our turns, we're going to get these cards. And look, oh, here's a card, and if we have a set of these cards, then we can go and get the relics. And we need to have, like right here is a space on the board that we can get this relic. Each one of the relics is only going to have 2 available spaces. So if both of the spaces that one of the relics are on go away before we get the relic, then, well, we lose the game. Remember what I said about cooperative games? Lots of ways to lose. But maybe we can go to a space and trade cards with each other to give cards to somebody so that they have a big enough set to get the relics, which is great. And then they can go to that space. So we need to work together and communicate to figure out what's the best way to get the relics and to use our turns efficiently. But this deck that's usually very good can be bad. And then when these happen, then we have to flood more and more of the tiles. And we have a tracker over here that we can choose if we want to start the game on a relatively easy level or start it way up on legendary and make the game that much more difficult. And depending on what level we are on this track, that's how many of these flood cards are going to flip over. So if I flip over the Temple of the Sun, or was that the Temple of the Moon, excuse me, then, well, this is now partially underwater. And I flip over another one, and we find out the Cave of Embers, and we go to the Cave of Embers, and we say, oh no, if the Cave of Embers was already partially underwater, it is removed from the game. So now it makes our maneuvering that much more difficult. And there's people that can swim through the missing tiles. That's one of the special abilities of the people. But basically we're trying to work together to get these 4 relics, and then get off of the island before too much of the island sinks that we can't get off, or we can't get any of the relics. So it's a pretty light game, but we're working together to try to figure out the best way to get our treasures and survive the game. So it's really, again, it's a pretty simple game. There are more complicated cooperative games out there, but if you want to work together for a common goal, this is a really great way to start. 2 other games I'm going to mention briefly, just for the sake of time, and because they're so famous, I'm not really going to do much of an intro for them, but if you want me to, I can do them later. One is Ticket to Ride, where basically we get these cards in our trains, and we have the routes that we want to fill out, and when we get enough cards to play to fill up a route, we can. It's really pretty simple and pretty fun, and it can be, if you want to be, kind of mean, because you can see what other players are doing and cut them off, or if you just want it to be a friendly game. It's a game I've seen people who are into board games and love board games and these super complicated games still like playing, though, because it's just simple and fun. And Small World is a kind of very, very light combat game where basically you have a race of people, and they have a special power. You can have Dragon Master Elves, Underworld Tritons, all different kinds of combinations, and it's pretty simple. All those little chits over there are your people, and you take over territories and eventually go into decline and pick a whole new race. And there's a little bit of strategy to it, but as far as a game involving combat, it's super light, but can be really fun. Alright, well, there was one more game I was going to show you, HeroScape, and I'd like to thank Tom Vassell for doing a great in-depth video for it. That's kind of what got me into board gaming. It's a pretty simple game. I wanted to play with my son. I was debating buying it off of eBay. The reason I'm not showing it is because it's out of print, probably will never be reprinted, and freaks like me buy it up on eBay whenever it's available. And it's really big and complicated to set up for kind of a 1-minute preview. But if it's something you'd like to see, let me know. If you have any other suggestions, if you want to see an economic game, if you want to see a war game, a bidding game, whatever you want to see, there's games out there that I may or may not own, but I can show it to you. The idea is that there's just so much available. There's party games I haven't even talked about. You do see Apples to Apples in the store. That's pretty popular. Dixit is another slightly... it's very different than Apples to Apples, but similar in some ways. But in my opinion, you kind of have to buy more sets of it to keep it fresh if you're playing with the same gamers, but something I enjoy. Lots of games. And, whatever topics you might be interested in, let me know. But here are some games that I think you can play with kids. There are even more suggestions than this. There are games you can play if you want to learn about gaming and introduce other people to gaming if you're interested in. And there are games that gamers, if you want to call it that, still enjoy playing even after, they've gotten into some of the bigger, heavier games. They're games I still enjoy playing, and, these are just a few suggestions. Like I said, if there's any type of thing you want to see, just let me know and I will try to accommodate. Alright, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.